welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 320, and today's date is March 21st, 2014, and the title of this episode is, As the Dollar Collapses, the Next False Flag Falls into Place. Because what are we actually seeing? Well, if we go out to Syria, we see the rebels, the paid mercenaries, they are completely losing control. The United States government, the central bankers, are losing control over Syria. And this is why we see that build up in Jordan right now with Israel, with the Arab nations, with Saudi Arabia, and they are building up military assets and building up troops right now. We have problems in Libya, where the Libyan people are taking over. They're pushing the government out, and the Libyan government is calling for international help and going to the UN, begging for some help, and of course, who will come to their assistance? Most likely, the United States. And then we have the problem in Ukraine right now with Russia. And of course, we see sanctions going back and forth. But again, we have to remember these sanctions aren't on Russia specifically. It is on individuals because they are a little nervous about putting full sanctions on Russia. So what we're seeing right now is a tit for tat, and they're backed into the corner. They lost Ukraine. They realize it, and what they're trying to do now is figure out how they can blame this entire economic collapse on another country, and they might have an out in many different places. They could have an out with Syria. They could have an out with Russia, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this report. But let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to talk about unemployment. And we know it's high, even though they're telling us it's low. But among veterans, what we're seeing right now is unemployment is quite high among veterans, and they're saying it's around 9%. And this is going along, with the BLS and the government statistics. And of course, we know this calculation is much higher, and they're feeling the effects. I mean, they're coming back from wars, they put their lives on the line, and they're coming back to no jobs whatsoever. Now, I know I talk about the housing imploding on itself quite a bit, and I understand that we talk about this a lot, and we've been tracking this all along, and we're seeing that housing is really not doing that well. But I wanted to step back for a minute and take a look at the cash buyers. Now, if we look at this and we go back to 2005, we're seeing the cash buyers from 2005 to roughly around the beginning of 2008. It was around 19%. It stayed pretty steady. Moving into 2008, into the latter part of the year, we're seeing it drop to about 17% or so. Now, right after 2008, when we move into 2009, the number of cash buyers all of a sudden increased to 30%. From 2009 to 2010, it increased up to 37%. From 2010 to 2011, it went to 50%. You see a pattern here? From 2011 to 2013, at the height, and I'm talking about the fall of 2013 when the president was out there in the summer saying that we've made a complete turnaround, the housing market is in recovery, prices are going up, people are buying like crazy. Look how many houses are being sold. That went up to about 60%, but we're seeing this number fall now as we head into the latter part of 2013 and into January and through February, March of 2014, and now it's starting to slide because, again, how many Americans do you know that have all of this cash on hand to go out and purchase these homes? These purchases were not from everyday Americans, and this is what they used over time to pump up the housing market. This is what they have been doing. They've been doing this for the entire economy. This is what they've been doing. They've been creating this illusion since 2008. And if you actually look at the data from that point of time to now, you can clearly see this. The same thing is with unemployment, with GDP. We know they've completely recalculated everything, and we understand that there are huge amount of layoffs. And right now, Sprint, they are closing 3 call centers, 55 stores, and they're laying off 1,400 people, and this is not stopping. We're just seeing thousands of layoffs coming every single day. Now, Illinois school districts in Springfield, I believe, they are looking, and they might lay off around 13,400 teachers because of budget problems. And again, we see the post office, we see teachers being laid off, we see teachers being laid off in Newark, which I mentioned a couple of reports ago, and then we see the big financial institutions laying off. And this is just beginning. This will continue. Now, we had Fed Fisher out there, and he's saying that QE was a massive gift intended to boost wealth. Now, this was a gift to who? This was a gift to the insiders. This was a gift to the 1% to become even wealthier, because none of this reached the everyday person, and they understand this, they know this, and it's very interesting when they come out with their statements of who they're actually talking to. They're not talking to the everyday person, they're talking to those 1%ers, the close insiders who've been making a fortune off of quantitative easing. And I'm not talking millions, I am talking billions upon billions of dollars, and this is the announcement saying, listen, we gave you this, and now we're coming to an end. And we can see this completely happening right in front of us, because we look at the stock market, we're seeing it's reaching all-time new highs. Everything is going up for absolutely no reason whatsoever. There are no fundamentals backing any of this, and this will come crashing down. Now, the NSA, as we know, is hacking into pretty much everything. But my question is, when they hack into private networks, into businesses, corporations, into private networks, how is it any different from a criminal hacking into a system? Because if a criminal, a hacker, decides to go ahead and hack into a private business and look at the financial information, look at personal data, they're tracked down and they're arrested. If the NSA does it, it's spying for national security. But again, the companies didn't give them permission. And what we're seeing right now is that the NSA has been hacking into private networks. In its quest to take down suspected terrorists and criminals abroad, the United States National Security Agency has adopted the practice of hacking the system administrators that oversee private computer networks. And this is in a new document that was just revealed. The Intercept has published a handful of leaked screenshots taken from an internal NSA message board where one spy agency specialist spoke extensively about compromising not the computers of specific targets, but rather the machines of the system administrator who controls the entire network. And the system administrator runs the network. It runs the security. It makes sure everything is working. The backups are working fine. People can get into the servers, get their data, and they've been hacking the gatekeeper to get into the rest of the system. And when they do this, it opens up back doors, it reduces the security that they have in place, and other people have the ability to get into these systems. And again, why aren't they brought up on charges? Because they just hacked into a private network, which there was security set up to keep them out, but they went through it. So we can use this as an example. They didn't. Let's think about this for a second. They didn't have warrants. They were just going around looking at all different private networks to get, their information on patents, investment information, to track the individuals, to bribe judges, and this is why, of course, they're doing it. But again, if you're living in your house and the NSA comes in, picks your lock, walks into your house, goes through your stuff, makes copies of your financial information, your bank information, how is this any different? They didn't have a warrant. They broke into your house because they picked the lock. They hacked into your house. It is exactly the same thing. There's no difference whatsoever. Now, we understand the government is trying to disarm the American people. I've said this many, many times. And they are actually making a push now. They're really pushing to get these bills that are pending in the Senate right now passed, and we have the UN Arms Treaty, we have the Dianne Feinstein bill, and right now what we're seeing, and we're seeing this a lot in Common Core. We see it on the whitehouse.gov site, and we're seeing it a lot in textbooks, where the future generations, what they're trying to do is dumb them down. And this is how they're doing it. There is a workbook out of Springfield, Illinois, and in this workbook, they're explaining the Second Amendment. And it's not only the Second Amendment. They're actually doing this to many of the amendments in the Bill of Rights. But let's look at the Second Amendment, what they said here. Now, they said this amendment states that people have the right to certain weapons, providing that they register them and they have not been in prison. The Founding Fathers included this amendment to prevent the United States from acting like the British, who had tried to take weapons away from the colonists. Well, this is not what the Second Amendment says. There's no such thing as registering, and there's no such thing as prison. What it says is every single person has the right to bear arms, and this right shall not be infringed upon. So what they're trying to do here is they're trying to rewrite the Second Amendment and make future generations, the younger, moving forward, understand that you need to have your weapons registered, that if you're in prison you can't have a weapon after that. And they're trying to continually brainwash the younger generation. And if we look at Common Core, and we look at their textbook, they also have said that, and this is what theirs in the Common Core book says, that Americans only have the right to keep and bear arms in a state militia. Well, again, that is false. And if you go to the whitehouse.gov site, here's their definition of the Second Amendment. No one's using the actual Second Amendment. They're rewording it to fit their agenda. Whitehouse.gov, the Second Amendment gives citizens the right to bear arms. Close, but it shall not be infringed. And it's not citizens, it's the people have the right, not citizens. They replace that word. So we can see exactly what is happening. They are brainwashing everyone to believe that these rights are not yours anymore, that you have to get your weapons registered, that you can only have these weapons if you're in a state militia, and they're trying to convince the youth of America going forward, and hopefully they will forget what the Second Amendment actually says, and they'll start believing this. And this is all part of the brainwash procedure. It's incremental, and they do this over time, and we see this happen a lot. Now, Dianne Feinstein, as we know, she has a bill pending in Senate. The President Obama asked for this bill to stay there after it was shot down during the Boston bombing, and he asked the senators, just keep it there because we're going to have a special event later on, and we'll get this thing passed. But Dianne Feinstein, she's out there. She's circulating a letter on Capitol Hill calling once again for a ban on semi-automatic rifles and asking for President Barack Obama to keep his State of the Union promise to make 2014 a year of action. They are going to push this event very soon. And she's going on about, citing the Gun Control Act of 1968. Feinstein states, in recent years, importers of firearms have taken advantage of ATF's interpretation of the sporting purposes test to evade the import ban. And again, the phrase contained in the Gun Control Act of 1968, Feinstein is referencing prohibits the importation of firearms that are not generally recognized as particularly suitable for or readily adaptable to sporting purposes. Again, according to the Second Amendment, every single American is allowed to bear arms, and arms is weapons, ammunition, and military armament. It cannot be infringed upon, which means to limit, the government cannot put any limits on the Second Amendment. And that's all they've been doing, is they've been creating law after law after law, and there's like 2,000 weapon laws on the books right now, and they want more because it's really not doing what they want. They want all of these weapons out of the American people's hands because they understand when the collapse comes, they need to take control of the American people. They're afraid of their power. They do not want to relinquish their power. The central bankers are very afraid of losing control of the country. They love printing money and having control and making tons of money from around the world, and this is why the Federal Reserve has their private police force, where the president said this private police force is actually the same as a police force in a town, and he gave them that designation. Now, Turkey is out there, and Erdogan has put the kibosh on Twitter because he doesn't like what people are saying. And this goes on to say the main Turkish opposition party says it will file a lawsuit against a decision by the government of Prime Minister Erdogan to block access to Twitter. Turkey blocked access to Twitter on Friday after Erdogan threatened to rip out the roots of social media. Now, again, he's out there trying to control the people. He is a puppet leader from the central bank U.S. government. And again, he's imposing these restrictions and taking away the rights of the people to use Twitter and other social media type of sites. And again, he belongs to the puppet. He is the puppet government of the United States. And again, we're not seeing the United States come down hard on him for not letting the people have their freedoms and democracy. Where is the U.S. government in these type of situations? Well, they really don't deal. They might put out a statement here and there, but they really hands off of that because he's already in our back pocket. We don't need to do anything. Who cares what they do to the people? As long as they keep the natural resources on the U.S. dollar and the private Western Central Bank in their country, we are good to go. Now, the United States is out there, and they're saying that Russia now is moving their ships, their bombers, into Latin America, and U.S. officials are very, very worried about this. And according to The Hill, Moscow is planning bases in countries in the region like Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. Russian President Putin's national security team met last week to discuss strengthening military ties with the region. And Senator Joe Donnelly saying they're on the march and they're coming. And again, this is a lot of propaganda that they're putting out there. They're demonizing Russia right now. You can see the sanctions. They're telling us that they have troops all along Ukraine, that they're marching into Ukraine. This was all the propaganda. And again, Putin actually really didn't do much. He took Crimea by having the people vote of where they want Crimea to be. He asked the military, which side would you like to be? If you don't want to be with us, you can cross and go be with Ukraine. And all we're seeing right now is war talk from the U.S., Ukraine Prime Minister, the Ukraine acting president, and again, Russia said, listen, fly over the country, we'll show you there's no troop build-up. Drive into the country, we'll show you there's no troop buildup, and this should satisfy you. And again, they don't care about that. They just want to beat their chest and say that we are going to war, we are going to war. And this is exactly what they want. They want some type of provocation to start so they can actually start the war. They want it to look like that Russia did something, or it doesn't matter if it's Russia. It could be anyone. It could be Syria. It could be Iran. It could be North Korea. The players are all the same. We know who the players are. It could be China. It makes no difference at this point. Now, we understand that the United States placed sanctions on the Russian oligarchs, and most of them, dumped or got out of whatever they were in right before the sanctions. And what we're seeing right now is a Cyprus-based oil trader announced that Timchenko, he was able to drop his stake in the company, and he got rid of 44% of it, and he is a billionaire. He's worth about $8.5 billion, and he did this right before he was sanctioned. So it's either they're being tipped off that they know it's coming, or they're just saying, listen, let's start getting out of all this stuff because they're going to be sanctioning each individual, and you don't want your assets being locked up. And you can see all of them have been doing this. Again, the United States, EU, Australia are not sanctioning Russia. They're sanctioning individuals, which really has no effect on anything. But they're trying to provoke, because they understand if they sanction Russia right now, it wouldn't be good for the United States. It wouldn't be good for Europe, and it would look like the central bankers and the governments of the EU, the government of Australia, the government of the United States actually caused this by sanctioning Russia. And this is not what they want to happen. They want it to the way they do this is they wanted to make it look like it's coming from the other country so they're not blamed, and this is what they're trying to do. But at the same time, the EU has agreed to expand its sanctions list over the Crimea referendum, and they added 12 more people, bringing their total to 33. And again, Russia's out there laughing, saying, why don't we just sanction all of us here in the cabinet? This is ridiculous. Just do it already, and you can just say you sanctioned everyone. Well, it looks like MasterCard and Visa jumped on the bandwagon, or the government told them to do this. Who knows? But it looks like the international payment system MasterCard has stopped serving clients at Russian banks. Visa halting operations with 3 more lenders, and they're really trying to squeeze Russia right now. And then, of course, Russia's out there, and they impose some sanctions on the United States. They're also saying, listen, Ukraine, we want our $11 billion back in discounted gas prices. The Prime Minister on Friday demanded Ukraine pay back $11 billion that he said Kiev had saved through discounted gas prices in return for hosting a Russian naval base in Crimea. Ukraine owes the money because Crimea is now part of Russia, and the two countries pretty much don't have this deal anymore, so you owe us quite a bit of money. And the total amount Ukraine owes Russia right now is around $16 billion. And again, we understand that if they actually implemented these sanctions on Russia, it would be a catastrophe for the United States and the European Union. And right now they're reporting that if the European Union and the United States actually sanction Russia, 6,000 German firms would be affected, and they would suffer catastrophic losses, and they wouldn't be able to recover from this. And they are realizing this right now. And this is why you don't see the sanctions on Russia. Now, in my other report, we went into how Russia said, listen, if you impose sanctions on Russia, we will make deals with other countries. We will trade with other countries, and we will actually bypass the dollar. And we'll do this with China. We'll do this with North Korea. We'll do this with Iran, with Saudi Arabia. We'll do this with Syria, and we will implode the petrodollar. And right now, Russia is preparing the announcement of the Holy Grail energy deal with none other than China, a move which would send geopolitical shockwaves around the world and bind the two nations in a commodity-backed axis. This would lay the groundwork for a new joint commodity-backed reserve currency that, guess what, bypasses the dollar. Now, who knows? The central bankers, they could have been sitting there going, God, I hope he does this. This way we can blame everything on Russia. Again, they do not want the blame. They rather see it come from someplace else. And this goes on to say that the finance minister said that Russia may regain from foreign borrowing this year, and this translates into they will bypass Western purchases of Russian debt funded by Chinese purchases of U.S. treasuries and go straight to the source. And again, this would completely implode and bring down the U.S. economy. And the central bankers know this, the EU knows this, and this could be their plan, because again, I've said this many times, they are not going to take the blame for this collapse. And right now, this goes on to say, May is in our plans, that they're planning to do this in the month of May, a Gazprom spokesman said when asked about the timing of an agreement. And again, if you add the bilateral trade denominated in either rubles or yuan or gold, add Iran, Iraq, India, the Saudis, because they've made a deal with China. They're building a huge oil refinery system. And again, if we look at all this, we can see what will happen to the petrodollar. It will completely implode on itself. It would collapse. It would be devalued, and the United States would end up in this spitting downward spiral into a collapse, and we would not be able to recover. The only way they could cover this up and blame this on another country is to say, yes, because of Russia, China, and all these other countries, they did this to America. And of course, they will add a false flag event into the mix, because otherwise, how would we go to war? And again, we can see what is going on here. This is all being set up for the next false flag. All the pieces now are starting to fit together. We see what they're playing. We see their moves. We see what the central bankers are doing. Now, because of all of this with Ukraine, France now is suspending military cooperation with Russia. European NATO states are now urging to spend more on defense because they're very worried about World War III and Ukraine and Russia marching into Ukraine and then into Poland and then, across just like Germany did. But again, we're really not seeing this. We're not seeing anything that they're telling us, and Poland is very, very nervous, and the Poland Defense Ministry has announced the country will speed up its efforts for a missile defense system. Poland has announced it will boost the pace of its missile defense tender. The shield that they have working right now, going from Poland all the way down to Romania, was to protect them against Iran, but we know really why it was there. It was really pointing to Russia, and the shield is planned to be completed in stages. And I mentioned this before. The first phase involves 8 sets of mid-range interceptor rockets, and they want to speed this entire thing up and be ready for what is coming. Now, the U.S. is holding drills like Russia has, the U.S. has. They were all scheduled all before this, but we know this is all BS, that they were never scheduled. But U.S. is holding a military drill in Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, and the Baltics, and they're doing this this Friday, and they're having their drills. Russia's having their drills. Everyone's flexing their muscles and letting everyone know that they're ready for anything. Now, the NATO chief says Ukraine events may affect European tactical nuclear reductions, that we might not even reduce our nuclear weapons because the treaty with Russia, both removing nuclear weapons, kind of stalled, and they're not going forward with this. Now, the U.S. has promised about 54 countries that if something happens, they will go to war with them. And the list is quite long. I mean, there's Albania, Belgium, Bulgaria, Canada, Croatia, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, all the countries. And again, they have agreements with all of these countries. If any one of these are attacked, the United States will step in and help out. And this is why the military force of the United States, we are spread very thin throughout the world. We are tired. We do not want war anymore. And again, we saw this during Syria when they were trying to get into Syria with the false flag event. The polls showed the United States people do not want war whatsoever. They don't even want to be near Syria. Well, more polls are coming out. We did a YouGov poll before showing the American people do not want to have anything to do with Ukraine. They do not want war or anything like that. And they've done another poll, and this is a Pew poll, and the Pew Research Center poll reported on March 11th that in a national survey over 1,000 adults, Americans by nearly 1-2 margin say it is more important for the United States to not get involved in the situation with Russia and Ukraine. Leave them alone. And again, this also goes on to say that the American people say, we do not want to go to war over this. Now again, the central bankers realize this. They realize that these poll numbers are not good for them. They can't push the American people to go to war. They can't push Congress to go to war. And the only way to do it is to have the United States attacked, because that would be the easiest way, with some type of false flag event. I mean, we saw the World Trade Center come down, and that was definitely a false flag event. We saw Boston bombing, which is a false flag event, and they're going to do another one. And they're going to use this for many, many different things, because they need to cover up a lot. They need to cover up the collapse. They need to cover up their system that they have going on. They need to capture and control the American people and keep them, because there's no coming out of this one, because they have played all their cards. The economy is so fragile that it cannot recover from this next collapse. It's impossible without the war and to reset the entire system, and they know this, and this is what they've been striving for, and this is what they've been doing. Now, we understand that the stock exchange all has kill switches. We understand that their cyber attacks are going to hit the financial institutions, and this is why they created the bail-in documents, and we all know this. This is nothing new. Australia has one, Switzerland, the European Union has one, Canada, United States, UK, and what we're seeing right now is many reports that there are malware implanted into financial systems, and they are sitting there dormant. They can't find them, and I discussed back in a couple of reports that there are malware in the financial systems in the US, in the EU, and in the UK, and all the countries are preparing for some type of cyber war. Well, now Australia, they're realizing that their banks and other large enterprises are being targeted by a bank Trojan called Hesperbot. And the malware features keylogger capabilities, can create screenshots and video capture, and they can set up a remote proxy to get into the system with ease. And it sits dormant on the system, just waiting to be called upon. And the attackers aim to obtain login credentials that give them access to, guess what, customers' bank account. And again, we see a malware sitting here in the United States, we see it in Australia, and this is all in preparation to activate all these malware viruses on these systems to bring the system down, coupled with denial of service attacks to make it really look good when they decide to bring the entire system down. Now, to play up the propaganda that there are cyber attacks and it's coming from another country, we got not hit, but the Syrian Electronic Army hackers have reportedly obtained documents that reveal how much money the FBI pays Microsoft each time agents try to obtain or view an individual customer's communication information. They're always throwing out the Syrian Electronic Army story, and it was out today showing that yes, they were getting documents. Again, the Syrian Electronic Army is continually doing this, and again, I don't believe they really exist. They're putting them out there for propaganda to make you believe that it is Syria. And why would Assad do this? I mean, he's winning in Syria. He's pushing the rebels out. There is no attack from the United States because he's getting rid of his chemical weapons. And he's doing everything that they say. Why would he start cyber attacking the United States, into SecCom, into CNN, into Microsoft, into the government websites? It makes no sense whatsoever for him to do this at this point. But Syria was hit with a cyber attack, and it brought the internet down for like 7 hours. And the European cyber army is claiming responsibility for this outage. And again, they were down. They brought them down, and the reason why they did this is because they are retaliating against the attacks of the Syrian Electronic Army, and they are showing that, if they're going to attack us, we're going to attack them back. And again, right now the internet is back up in Syria. They brought it back up, but again, we can see how devastating these cyber attacks can be. Once they're put and focused on, they can bring down the internet, they can bring down the power grid, they can bring down anything they want. Now, the question is who is they? It's those people who are going to lose the most because the economies are not doing well. Now, the European Union, they're very worried about this Syrian crisis right now. Diplomats said the EU has been concerned over U.S. policy concerning the Sunni revolt in Syria. The diplomat said the administration of President Obama was tolerating the flow of fighters and weapons to al-Qaeda militias in northern Syria. Syria has attracted thousands of Europeans, and some of them are returning home radicalized, and they could spread terrorism throughout the country. So now we see it here in the United States. We see it in the European countries. They're just laying the groundwork for this next false flag. And this is exactly what is going on. And a new report has come out saying there's about 140 cases of missing or unauthorized use of nuclear and radioactive material that has been reported to UN atomic agencies. Now, they're saying that they can't find them, and most of this is loss or theft of highly enriched uranium, plutonium, or different types of radioactive sources, potentially serious, or it's very potentially as serious as Al-Qaeda-style militants could try to use them to make a crude nuclear device or so-called dirty bomb. Now, here we are again with this nuclear material that has gone missing, and they're saying that Al-Qaeda could use this, and they can use it as a dirty bomb. And this goes on to say, but even if they can't be used for making a nuclear weapon, they can be used in radioactive dispersal devices, which is a huge concern. And again, we don't know where this radioactive material is. Remember, in Mexico, there was a truck that was stolen that did have radioactive material, and this apparently has been going on all over the place because there's really no security when it has to do with medical radioactive material. And this goes on to say, because radioactive material is less hard to find and the device is easier to make, experts say a dirty bomb, which could cause panic and have serious economic again, and environmental consequences, is a more likely threat than a deadly atom bomb. Radical groups could theoretically build a crude nuclear bomb and set it off in any number of cities. So what are we seeing right now? Well, we are seeing this come full circle here. We understand that Syria, Assad is winning, pushing the rebels out. United States government, central bankers are fighting against time because they need to get into Syria. They're having the problem in Ukraine. The plan didn't go as they thought it was going to go. They thought they were going to have the entire Ukraine, and they were going to put this on the EU system and incorporate them into NATO. Things did not go as planned. They see Russia out there, and they're trying to demonize Russia. They see Syria. They're building up arms. They're getting ready to do something. We see the Turkish military on the border of Syria. We see Israel right now building up its military for an Iranian strike. We see them budgeting a lot of money for this strike. We see all of this happening right now. Now, we have to remember, they also told us about the intelligence information that came out of CNN saying Syria has biological and chemical weapons which are hidden in the Alawite section of Syria, and that could be used. We have to remember the lone wolf groups that are inside the United States that could be radicalized. They just showed us one of these lone wolf men who was part of the National Guard, and the FBI thwarted that attack on the LA subway. So all of this is starting to fit together right now. And now, of course, we have the radioactive material that is completely missing, which they could easily blame on Iran right now, saying that they were making a dirty bomb because they've told us this once before. And all of this can come full circle where they can create this event. And don't forget about the cyber attacks from the Syrian Electronic Army and from Russia and from China. This is really starting to come together. They have this timeline right now, and they are pushing their agenda forward because they understand the economic collapse is coming, and they are just getting ready to do it. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.